3 minutes after I placed my resignation letter on the desk, the vice president burst into laughter like I'd just told him the world's funniest joke. 5 minutes later, he realized I wasn't leaving empty-handed. 10 minutes after that, he understood the empire he'd been boasting about was about to crumble into ash. And only I knew exactly when that fire would ignite. If you think no one dares to expose a corrupt boss right in front of the board of directors, let me tell you my story. My name is Isabel Morgan, and I'm 38 years old. For the past 7 years, I've been the chief engineer and systems architect at Orion Dynamics, a tech company that promised to explode onto the global stage with groundbreaking innovations. The company's reputation wasn't built on empty promises. It was built on my work, though nobody knew it yet. The man sitting across from me, still chuckling at what he thought was my pathetic attempt at leverage, was Raymond Black. 55 years old, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, and an exterior that screamed corporate success. The tech world hailed him as the golden brain behind Orion's technological breakthroughs. What they didn't know was that Raymond couldn't code his way out of a paper bag, let alone architect the AI systems that had made Orion Dynamics a household name. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every line of code that powered our revolutionary Orion IQ artificial intelligence platform, it all came from my mind, my hands, my sleepless nights. But Raymond had perfected the art of manipulation, positioning himself as the visionary while I remained the invisible ghost in the machine. The first crack in my faith appeared during a routine performance review 6 months ago. I'd just finished presenting the quarterly improvements to our core AI algorithms, detailing how I'd managed to increase processing efficiency by 37% while reducing server costs by nearly $500,000 annually. Raymond leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, wearing that condescending smile I'd grown to despise. "You should be grateful, Isabel. Without me, you'd just be another nameless programmer drowning in a sea of code monkeys." The words hit me like a physical blow. 7 years of dedication, of pouring my soul into revolutionary technology. And this was how he saw me, as someone who should be thankful for the scraps he threw my way. That night, I made my first backup of the development history. Every commit, every iteration, every breakthrough moment was documented with timestamps and digital signatures. I told myself it was just insurance, but deep down, I knew something had fundamentally shifted. The breaking point came during Orion Dynamics' 15th anniversary celebration. The entire executive team was there, along with board members, investors, and industry luminaries. The ballroom of the Meridian Hotel glittered with the promise of technological dominance and financial success. I was standing near the bar, nursing a glass of wine and watching Raymond work the room like the seasoned politician he'd become, when I overheard a conversation that would change everything. Chairman of the board Marcus Thornfield was speaking with Raymond in hushed tones, but their voices carried just enough for me to catch the crucial words. "The Orion IQ presentation to the Pentagon next month," Thornfield was saying. "Are you confident in the technology's capabilities?" Raymond's chest puffed out with pride. "Marcus, I single-handedly developed the Orion IQ system. Without my innovations, the company's AI would be nothing more than glorified chatbot technology. I've built something that will revolutionize how governments and corporations handle data processing." I nearly dropped my wine glass. Single-handedly developed? The man who'd never written a line of functional code in his life was claiming credit for 3 years of my relentless work, my breakthrough algorithms, my revolutionary approach to neural network optimization. That's when I knew I wouldn't go down with this ship of lies. The next 18 months became a masterclass in strategic preparation. Every decision I made was calculated, every move designed to build an unassailable position for the inevitable confrontation. First, I systematically documented everything, every email exchange, every meeting note. Every piece of code I'd written was backed up with meticulous timestamps and digital signatures. I created a comprehensive timeline showing my development process, complete with early drafts, iteration notes, and problem-solving approaches that only the actual creator could have conceived. But documentation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed legal protection. Working with a discreet attorney named Patricia Hawkins, I discovered that Orion's employee handbook contained a clause I could exploit. The company's intellectual property agreements had a loophole regarding independent research conducted during personal time. With careful maneuvering, I adjusted my work schedule to ensure that several crucial breakthroughs occurred during officially logged personal hours, making them technically my intellectual property rather than the company's. The most delicate part of my strategy involved establishing contact with Vega Innovations, a smaller but ambitious tech company that had been trying to compete with Orion for years. Their CEO, Amanda Cross, was a brilliant strategist who understood that talent was more valuable than brand recognition. I'd met Amanda at several industry conferences, and she'd made it clear that Vega's doors were always open to me. Previously, I'd declined out of loyalty to Orion and belief that Raymond would eventually give me proper recognition. Now I understood that loyalty was a one-way street. Through carefully orchestrated conversations, I began feeding Amanda information about Orion's technical limitations, not proprietary secrets, but insights into why their approach was fundamentally flawed compared to what I could build with proper resources and recognition. The most damning evidence I collected was audio recordings of Raymond's technical discussions. Using my phone during seemingly casual conversations, I captured dozens of instances where he demonstrated complete ignorance of the systems he claimed to have developed. When pressed for technical details, he'd either deflect with corporate speak or provide answers that were so fundamentally wrong they'd make a first-year computer science student laugh. During one particularly revealing conversation, I asked him to explain the core logic behind Orion IQ's pattern recognition algorithm. His response was a word salad of buzzwords that had no connection to how the system actually functioned. It's really about leveraging synergistic data modalities to create paradigm-shifting intelligence matrices, he'd said, using his serious executive voice. The key is implementing blockchain-adjacent processing nodes that can interface with quantum-ready computational frameworks. I nearly bit my tongue to keep from laughing. The man was describing technology that didn't exist, using terms that made no sense together to explain a system that worked on entirely different principles. As my preparation phase neared completion, I reflected on how I'd arrived at this moment. Growing up in a working-class family in Ohio, I'd always been fascinated by puzzles and patterns. My parents, both factory workers, had sacrificed everything to send me to MIT, where I'd earned my doctorate in computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence. Raymond had recruited me straight out of my postdoc program at Stanford. He'd painted a picture of Orion as a place where brilliant minds could change the world, where innovation was valued over politics, where recognition went to those who earned it. For the first few years, I'd believed him. I threw myself into research and development, working 16-hour days, sleeping in the office, living and breathing code. The early versions of what would become Orion IQ were crude but promising. I refined them obsessively, breakthrough by breakthrough, until they became something truly revolutionary. But as the technology improved, Raymond's involvement became more about taking credit and less about contributing. He'd swoop in during presentations, claiming ownership of ideas he'd never understood, positioning himself as the mastermind while I remained the unnamed engineer in the background. The final straw came when I discovered Raymond had been actively undermining my attempts to publish research papers that would establish my credentials in the academic community. He'd convinced me that keeping our methods secret was essential for competitive advantage, but I later learned he'd been afraid that published papers would reveal who the real innovator was. Now, sitting in my carefully prepared position, I was ready to execute the endgame. The morning I walked into Raymond's glass-walled office, I felt a calm I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about ensuring that truth prevailed over manipulation, that talent was recognized over politics. Raymond was on a conference call, gesturing animatedly as he discussed his latest innovations with what sounded like potential investors. I waited patiently, my resignation letter in one hand and a carefully prepared folder in the other. When he finished the call, he looked up with that familiar, condescending smile. "Isabel, what can I do for you? I hope you're not here to ask for another raise." The board has been very clear about budget constraints. I placed the resignation letter on his desk without a word. He glanced at it, then looked back at me with genuine surprise. A resignation? Are you serious? Completely serious, I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional. That's when he burst into laughter. Not a chuckle, not a smirk, but full-blown, belly-shaking laughter that echoed through his office walls. "Oh, Isabel," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "I have to admire your timing. Right before the Pentagon presentation, right when we're about to close the biggest deal in company history, you decide to have a little tantrum." He leaned back in his chair, still grinning. "Let me give you some free advice, sweetheart. You're 38 years old. You've spent 7 years at one company, and your resume shows you as a mid-level engineer with no leadership experience. Who exactly do you think is going to hire someone like you? The tech world moves fast, and you've been sitting still." I remained silent, letting him continue his monologue. "The truth is, Isabel, you need me more than I need you. I've been carrying you for years, giving you opportunities to work on projects far beyond your actual capabilities. Without my guidance, you'd still be debugging database queries for some startup that goes belly up within 6 months." He stood up, walking around his desk to tower over me. It was a classic intimidation tactic, one I'd seen him use on countless employees over the years. "So here's what we're going to do," he continued. "You're going to take back this little letter, we're going to pretend this conversation never happened, and you're going to continue doing exactly what you've been doing. And if you're very, very good, maybe I'll consider giving you a small bonus at the end of the year." That's when I placed the folder on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, his confidence wavering slightly. "Complete documentation proving that I am the sole creator of every piece of technology you've been claiming credit for," I said calmly. "Development logs, code repositories, design documents, problem-solving approaches, and technical specifications that only the actual creator could have produced." Raymond's face went pale. "That's company property. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted, opening the folder to reveal the first page of legal documentation. According to Section 7.3 of Orion's Employee Handbook, research conducted during personal time using personal resources remains the intellectual property of the individual employee. I've been very careful to ensure that all my breakthrough work falls under this category. His hands shook slightly as he flipped through the pages. Technical diagrams, code samples, iterative development notes, all clearly marked with timestamps and digital signatures proving they were my original work. "This is impossible," he whispered. "You can't prove—" "I can prove everything," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I have audio recordings of our technical discussions where you demonstrate complete ignorance of the systems you claim to have developed. I have email chains showing how you've systematically taken credit for my innovations. I have documentation proving that every patent filed under your name was based on my research." Raymond sank back into his chair, his corporate facade crumbling. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that your empire was built on lies, and that empire is about to collapse." I stood up, straightening my jacket. "By the time you finish reading that folder, Vega Innovations will have announced the acquisition of their new Chief Technology Officer, me. And within 6 months, we'll be launching technology that makes Orion IQ look like a toy." The blood drained from his face. "You can't do this. The non-compete clause only applies to employees who sign management-level agreements," I replied. I was careful to review my contract. Despite doing management-level work, I was never officially promoted to a management position. Remember? You made sure of that to keep my salary low. I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Raymond? That Pentagon presentation next month? You might want to start preparing for some very technical questions. Questions that only someone who actually developed the technology could answer." The next phase of my plan unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. Within hours of my resignation, Raymond was frantically calling emergency meetings with the legal department, demanding they find a way to stop me from leaving with proprietary information. But I'd been careful. Every piece of documentation I'd taken was legally mine. Every breakthrough I'd claimed was properly documented as my personal research. Orion's legal team, led by the competent but ultimately practical David Walsh, quickly realized they had no legal grounds to challenge my departure. What they didn't expect was my next move. Working with Patricia Hawkins and Vega's legal team, I began a systematic campaign to establish the true ownership of Orion's core technologies. This wasn't about corporate espionage or theft. It was about correcting the public record and ensuring that credit went where it was due. The first shot was fired through industry publications. I began giving interviews to technology journals discussing my previous work in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I never mentioned Orion by name, but the technical details I shared made it clear to anyone familiar with the field that I was describing the foundational technologies behind Orion IQ. The interviews were carefully crafted to raise questions without making direct accusations. When asked about the future of AI development, I'd mention specific technical challenges and solutions that only someone intimately familiar with Orion IQ's architecture could know. The key breakthrough in modern AI systems, I explained to TechCrunch, comes from optimizing the interaction between neural network layers using a hybrid approach that combines traditional machine learning with predictive modeling. Most companies are still struggling with processing efficiency, but the solution involves restructuring the data flow architecture at the foundational level. To anyone paying attention, it was obvious that I was describing proprietary Orion technology. But more importantly, I was describing it with the deep understanding that only comes from creating it yourself. The tech community began to take notice. Forum discussions started appearing, questioning why Orion's supposed chief architect had never published academic papers or spoken at technical conferences. People began asking why Raymond Black, despite his reputation as a brilliant innovator, had never demonstrated any technical knowledge in public settings. Meanwhile, Raymond was struggling to maintain his facade. Without me to provide technical details and explanations, he was forced to rely on generic corporate speak and marketing materials. The contrast between his shallow understanding and my deep technical knowledge became increasingly apparent to industry observers. The situation reached a tipping point when Raymond agreed to be the keynote speaker at the Global Technology Summit, an annual conference that brought together the world's leading innovators and technical experts. The topic of his presentation was The Future of AI and Core Intelligence Systems, essentially a discussion of everything I developed at Orion. I made sure to attend the conference, sitting in the front row alongside Amanda Cross, Vega's CEO. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone who understood the industry dynamics. Raymond's presentation started confidently enough. He had slides prepared by the marketing department, filled with impressive graphics and bold claims about Orion's technological superiority. But when the technical Q&A session began, everything fell apart. The first question came from Dr. Sarah Chen, a respected AI researcher from Carnegie Mellon. Mr. Black, can you explain the specific algorithmic approach you used to solve the vanishing gradient problem in your deep learning implementation? Raymond's face went blank. The vanishing gradient problem was a fundamental challenge in neural network design, and solving it had been one of my most significant breakthroughs. But Raymond had never understood the technical details. Well, he stammered, it's really about implementing best practices and leveraging cutting-edge methodologies to optimize the processing paradigms. The audience exchanged glances. Dr. Chen pressed further. Could you be more specific about the mathematical approach? What activation functions did you use? And how did you modify the backpropagation algorithm? Raymond's answer was painful to watch. He strung together technical terms that made no sense in context, describing approaches that were either outdated or completely fictional. With each word, it became more obvious that he had no idea what he was talking about. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Dr. Chen turned to the audience and said, I notice we have Isabel Morgan here today. Ms. Morgan, I've been following your recent interviews with great interest. You seem to have an exceptional understanding of the technologies we're discussing. Would you mind sharing your perspective on the challenges Mr. Black has outlined? The conference moderator looked uncertain, but the audience was clearly interested. Raymond tried to object, but his weak protests were drowned out by encouraging applause. I walked to the podium, my heart pounding but my mind crystal clear. This was the moment 7 years of suppressed recognition had been building toward. "Thank you, Dr. Chen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. The vanishing gradient problem is indeed one of the most significant challenges in deep learning architecture. The solution requires a fundamental rethinking of how we structure information flow between network layers. I launched into a detailed technical explanation, describing not just the theoretical approach, but the practical implementation challenges I'd encountered and overcome. I discussed the mathematical foundations, the iterative refinement process, and the breakthrough moments that had led to the current state of the technology. The audience was captivated. These were people who understood the difference between marketing speak and genuine technical expertise. They could see that I wasn't just reciting memorized facts. I was describing work I'd actually done, problems I'd actually solved, innovations I'd actually created. When I finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Dr. Chen stood up, leading a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Raymond remained seated, his face ashen, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse. But I wasn't finished. "I want to thank the Global Technology Summit for giving me this opportunity," I continued as the applause died down. "And I want to announce that I'll be joining Vega Innovations as their Chief Technology Officer, where I'll be continuing to develop the next generation of AI systems." The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Within hours, tech blogs and news sites were buzzing with speculation about what my move meant for both Orion and Vega. The contrast between my technical presentation and Raymond's fumbling performance became the subject of intense discussion. The fallout was swift and devastating. Financial analysts began questioning Orion's technological claims. If their supposed chief architect couldn't explain the basics of their core technology, what did that say about the company's actual capabilities? Stock prices began to slide as investors realized that Orion's competitive advantage might be walking out the door with me. Industry publications launched investigations into the true origins of Orion IQ. Journalists who had previously accepted Raymond's claims at face value began digging deeper, asking harder questions, demanding technical proof of his innovations. The Pentagon presentation, Raymond's big moment to secure the largest contract in Orion's history, became a disaster. Without my technical expertise to fall back on, Raymond was exposed as a fraud in front of the most sophisticated technology buyers in the world. The contract was withdrawn, and rumors began circulating about a possible FBI investigation into Orion's claims about their classified capabilities. Within 2 weeks of the conference, Orion's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Marcus Thornfield, the same chairman who had praised Raymond's single-handed development of Orion IQ, was now facing the reality that their star executive was a complete fraud. The board's decision was inevitable. Raymond was terminated immediately, officially for strategic differences, but unofficially for nearly destroying the company through his deception. The press release was carefully worded to avoid legal liability, but everyone in the industry understood what had really happened. Meanwhile, Vega Innovations was experiencing unprecedented growth. Our announcement that I would be leading the development of next-generation AI systems had attracted attention from major investors and potential clients. The company's valuation doubled overnight, and we were fielding inquiries from organizations that had previously been loyal Orion customers. But the most satisfying moment came 3 months later, when I received a message from Raymond's personal email account. "Isabel," it read, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant to minimize your contributions to Orion's success. I've been speaking with several attorneys about the possibility of reaching a mutually beneficial agreement regarding the recent events. I believe we can work together to resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone involved. Would you be willing to meet for coffee to discuss the possibilities?" I stared at the message for a long time, remembering the man who had laughed at my resignation, who had called me a nameless programmer, who had spent 7 years stealing credit for my life's work. Then I deleted the message without responding. I didn't need to destroy Raymond Black. The truth had already done that job for me. From my new office at Vega Innovations, I could see the entire city spread out below me. The view reminded me of how far I'd come, not just professionally, but personally. For 7 years, I'd allowed someone else to define my worth, to determine my value, to control my destiny. Never again. The Orion IQ technology that Raymond had claimed as his own was already becoming obsolete. The systems I was developing at Vega were faster, more efficient, and more capable than anything Orion had ever produced. Within 6 months, we would be launching products that would make their entire technological portfolio look like relics from a previous generation. But more importantly, I had reclaimed something that couldn't be measured in patents or stock prices: my identity as an innovator, my recognition as a creator, my rightful place in the history of technological advancement. The industry now knew who I was. Academic journals were publishing my research. Conference organizers were inviting me to speak. Young engineers were seeking my mentorship. The recognition I'd been denied for 7 years was finally mine. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, my phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from Amanda Cross. The Japanese consortium wants to meet next week. They're interested in licensing our neural network architecture for their robotics division. Congratulations, Isabel. You've officially made Vega a major player in the global AI market. I smiled, closing my laptop for the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new innovations, new opportunities to push the boundaries of what was possible. But tonight, I was content to savor the satisfaction of a job well done. The truth had set me free, and in doing so, it had destroyed the man who had tried to bury it. Raymond Black was yesterday's news. I was the future.